You belong in a nursing home. That's what she screamed across the kitchen, her voice sharp enough to pierce glass, her hands still wet from the dishwater I had just asked her to turn off. I stood there, holding a plate, the last from dinner, while my grandson Ben froze mid-step on his way to the living room, a spoon still in his hand. I didn't answer. I just dried the plate and set it on the rack. But inside me, something cracked, not loudly, not dramatically, like a slow split in old wood. Quiet, but irreversible. She didn't even seem to realize what she'd said. Or maybe she did and just didn't care anymore. Haley had a way of tossing cruelty like breadcrumbs, small, deliberate, as if to keep control over every step I took in my own house. And that house? My name's on the deed, not hers. My name. But for the past 2 years, since Trevor and Haley moved in with the boys, just for a few months after Trevor lost his job, that name meant less and less. They'd taken over slowly. First it was the garage. Trevor needed workspace. Then the den. Haley wanted an office for her side projects. I stopped watching the news in the evenings because the TV was always in use. I started eating earlier, alone in the kitchen, because dinner had turned into a noisy, late affair where I was expected to cook, but not necessarily be part of the conversation. Haley didn't like when I butted in with old stories. And yet I stayed quiet, because they were family, because Trevor was my son, because I loved the boys, Ben and little Marcus, even though Marcus barely knew me anymore, always clinging to Haley like I was the stranger here. That night, I went to bed early. Not a word to Haley, not a comment to Trevor, who didn't even look up from his laptop during the whole outburst. I lay under my quilt, the same one I stitched with Robert the year he died, and stared at the ceiling. I could still hear the dishwasher humming, still smell the leftover garlic from the roast, still feel the heat of the plate in my hand when she said it. You belong in a nursing home. Not, can we talk about the future, Joe? Not, are you feeling okay lately? No, just that. A sentence that threw out a lifetime of dignity like trash after dinner. I didn't cry. I haven't cried in years, not since the day we buried Robert. But I didn't sleep either. I just lay there, watching the faint shadow of the tree outside dance on the ceiling like it used to when I rocked Trevor to sleep in this very room. He was afraid of that shadow then. Funny, isn't it? The things we grow into. When the first light broke through the blinds, I sat up and reached for my robe. My knees cracked the way they do now when I move too quickly, but I didn't mind. For the first time in a long while, my movements had direction. I went to the kitchen, made a pot of coffee, and sat down at the table. The seat across from me was empty. No one had touched the breakfast I laid out. I didn't mind. I didn't make it for them. On the wall near the fridge is a picture of me and Robert on the day we bought this house. I was 34. My hair was still red then, pulled back in a braid, and Robert had that foolish grin he always wore when he knew he was getting away with something. It's ours, he said that day, lifting me over the threshold like a joke. All ours. We paid off the mortgage 12 years later. Trevor was just a teenager when Robert passed. I remember he cried, real tears, the kind that make your shoulders shake. I held him that night, both of us in pieces. He said he'd take care of me from now on. Said he'd make his dad proud. And I believed him. What a fool I've been. Now it's Haley's voice that echoes through the house, telling the boys what not to touch, reminding Trevor to follow up on job applications, listing things we're out of, as if I'm the housekeeper, not the homeowner. Every time I walk into a room, she tenses, like I'm interrupting some sacred space. And Trevor, he's just tired, always tired, too tired to talk, too tired to notice me disappearing room by room. But this morning, I wasn't tired. I pulled out the notebook where I keep all the important things: birthdays, passwords, the phone number of my lawyer, Edward Casey. He helped us with the estate when Robert passed. Honest man. Quiet, patient, always wore the same navy tie. I found his number, dialed, and waited. "Mrs. Miller?" he answered after 2 rings. "Yes, Edward. It's Joe. I need to make an appointment. Today, if possible." He hesitated only a moment. "Of course. What's the matter?" "I want to talk about ownership and eviction procedure." Silence. "Then, I'll see you at 11. I hung up and sipped my coffee slowly. The boys were still sleeping. Trevor and Haley hadn't stirred. I stared out the window at the dogwood tree in the backyard. Robert planted that tree the year Trevor was born. You belong in a nursing home. Maybe one day, but not today. Today, I belong right here, in my house, at my table, with my name on the deed and my dignity intact. And they don't belong here anymore. I didn't tell them I was leaving that morning. Let them think I'd gone to the market or to the doctor, whatever made them feel better about ignoring me. I took my brown coat, the one with the loose button, and locked the front door behind me. The air was crisp, and for once, I didn't feel cold, just focused. Edward's office was still in that little brick building across from the post office. Nothing had changed about it. Same sign out front, same clinking bell on the door. I sat in the same chair I sat in when Robert and I signed the will years ago. The fabric on the armrest was a little more worn, but it still held firm. Edward came out himself to greet me. He looked older, don't we all? But his eyes were as sharp as ever. "Mrs. Miller," he said warmly, extending a hand. "It's been a long time." "It has. But I'm afraid I'm not here for pleasantries." He nodded, as if he'd expected that. We walked into his office, and he gestured to the leather chair across from his desk. I didn't sit. I pulled a folded paper from my coat pocket and laid it on the desk. "That's the deed. The house is in my name alone, paid off in 1999. I want to start the process of evicting my son and his wife. Legally. Properly." Edward didn't blink. He unfolded the paper, looked it over, and then finally raised his eyes to mine. "This won't be easy, Joe. I'm not expecting it to be. And I have to ask, are you safe at home? Has there been any violence? Intimidation?" "No. Nothing that would show up in a police report. Just years of being erased from my own life." He nodded again. "Tell me everything." So I did, calmly, without embellishment. The cold dinners, the backhanded remarks, the way Haley spoke to me like I was in the way. Trevor's silence. His complicity. The room stayed quiet as I talked, except for the occasional scribble of his pen. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "You have full legal standing to request that they vacate the property, especially if they don't pay rent or have a lease. You've allowed them to stay by goodwill, not contract." "Exactly. We'll send a formal notice to vacate. It gives them 30 days. If they don't leave, we proceed to court. I want the notice delivered today. I can have a courier send it by the afternoon." That was all I needed. I signed the authorization paperwork. My hands didn't shake. When I left the office, the sun had come out. I hadn't noticed before how heavy the clouds had been. I walked 2 blocks to the coffee shop, bought myself a cinnamon roll and a small tea, and sat at a table by the window. I didn't pull out a book or look at my phone. I just sat. Quiet. Still. The cinnamon roll was too sweet, the tea a little bitter, but it felt good to be out of the house, my house, by my own choice. When I returned home, Haley was standing in the driveway, phone to her ear, squinting in the sun. She didn't notice me at first. Her voice was raised, annoyed. "No, I don't care if she's your mother," she snapped into the phone. "She's making everything miserable. The kids are stressed. I'm stressed. God, Trevor, I need some support here." I didn't stop. I walked past her like she was just another neighbor's visitor. She jumped when she saw me, ended the call quickly. "Oh, you're back." "Yes." "Where were you?" I didn't answer. I unlocked the front door, stepped inside, and let it close behind me. I didn't slam it. I just closed it. That afternoon, I made soup. Chicken and rice. The kind Trevor used to like when he had strep throat. No one else came into the kitchen. No one offered to help. I set aside a small bowl for myself and put the rest in the fridge. I didn't call them to dinner. I didn't even mention I'd cooked. Around 7, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Trevor appeared in the doorway, rubbing the back of his neck. "Hey, Mom." "Trevor, did you go somewhere earlier?" "Yes." He hesitated. "Everything okay?" "No." That made him stop. "What's going on?" "I spoke to Edward Casey. He'll be sending you and Haley a letter tomorrow." His brow furrowed. "What kind of letter?" "A notice to vacate." He blinked at me like he hadn't understood the words. "You're... what?" "I'm asking you to leave the house, Trevor. Legally. You have 30 days. You can't be serious." "I am." "But Mom, we live here." "No, Trevor. I live here. You stay here. And you've overstayed." He stepped into the room, lowering his voice. "Is this because of Haley? Because of something she said?" "She said what she meant. But this is ridiculous. Where are we supposed to go?" "I don't know. That's not my responsibility." He ran a hand through his hair, just like he used to when he was 15 and trying to talk his way out of grounding. "Jesus, Mom, this is your family." "No, Trevor, you're my family. And you've forgotten what that means." He didn't say anything after that, just stood there, stunned, until Haley's voice called down the hall. "What's going on?" Trevor didn't answer. He turned and left the room. I finished my soup. The spoon clinked gently against the bowl. The TV played something low in the background, some laugh-track sitcom I never watched. Outside, the sun was setting. And in my chest, for the first time in 2 years, I felt peace. Not joy, not satisfaction, just peace. Like something had shifted back into its rightful place. Tomorrow would be difficult. There would be yelling, threats, maybe even tears. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, I was home. The letter arrived just after noon, delivered by courier in a crisp gray envelope with Edward's firm's insignia printed on the front. I was in the backyard trimming the lavender bush when I saw the man in the blazer walk up to the porch. He didn't ring the bell, just slipped the envelope through the slot and left without a word. I left the clippers in the grass and went inside, listening. The house was quiet. Marcus must have been down for his nap, and Haley had taken Ben to soccer practice earlier. Only Trevor was home, typing away in the den that used to be my sewing room. I didn't touch the envelope. I waited. About 20 minutes later, I heard Trevor's chair creak and his footsteps shuffle down the hallway. Then the telltale pause when he spotted the letter on the console table. Silence. Then the tier of paper. I stayed in the kitchen, rinsing my hands under cold water. A minute later, I heard his voice from the hallway, loud, incredulous. Mom? I dried my hands. Did you do this? He walked into the kitchen holding the letter like it was a dead animal. What the hell is this? You know what it is. He slapped the letter down on the counter. You had a lawyer send us a notice to vacate. A real lawyer. With real paperwork. Yes. Are you serious right now? I was serious yesterday. And I'm serious today. You didn't even talk to us. I tried, Trevor. For 2 years I tried. You weren't listening. He scoffed, hands on his hips. You can't just kick us out? We're family. I turned and looked at him. Really looked. His face was red, but not with embarrassment, just anger. Not once did I see regret. Not once did he ask, why? 30 days, I said quietly. I think that's more than fair. He opened his mouth to say something else, but the front door banged open and Haley's voice cut through the air. We're home. Trevor flinched. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. I heard her mutter a second later, probably seeing the envelope on the table. Then she appeared in the kitchen doorway, Ben trailing behind her with his cleats still on. She had the letter now. Eviction? Her voice pitched up, sharp and fast, like a snapped wire. Are you out of your mind? I looked at her, standing there with the envelope crushed in her hand. Ben's eyes flicked between us. You're kicking us out? Like we're squatters? You've lived here rent-free for 2 years. We're raising your grandchildren. And I've raised you both. Haley stepped closer, waving the letter in my face. This is insane. Trevor, are you really letting her do this? He looked at her but said nothing. This is my house, Haley. No, this is our home. No, I said quietly. It's mine. I built it with my husband. I paid for it. I kept it up for 40 years. You've lived here, but you've never made it yours. She laughed bitterly, folding her arms. Right. You're just bitter because you're old and lonely and want to make everyone else miserable. Ben shifted awkwardly behind her. I met his eyes for just a second. Those same gray eyes Trevor had when he was a boy. He looked confused, ashamed. I took a breath and turned to him. Ben, go upstairs and take off your cleats, please. He hesitated. Now, sweetheart. He nodded and left. When I turned back, Haley was already building steam. You're going to traumatize the kids. Is that what you want? To throw them out onto the street? You make enough money to rent an apartment. More than enough, judging by the clothes, the new SUV, the organic groceries you order every week. Excuse me? I know what groceries cost, Haley. I do the books in my head every time I open the fridge. Trevor cleared his throat, his voice low. Mom, can't we just talk about this? Work something out? We're past talking, I said, calm but firm. I tried for too long, and I've had enough. Haley grabbed her bag. Fine, we'll see about this. You'll regret it. Maybe, but not today. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Trevor lingered for a moment, still standing in the kitchen. He didn't look at me. Just ran his hand through his hair and muttered, You didn't have to do it like this. Yes, I did. He left without another word. That night, the house was quieter than it had been in years. No arguments over bedtime. No sitcoms blaring from the living room. No heavy steps overhead. Just the creak of the old wood, the hum of the fridge, and the occasional breath of wind against the windows. I made myself a cup of peppermint tea and sat by the window, the same place I used to rock Trevor when he had ear infections. He'd cry, and I'd sing lullabies until he drifted off in my arms. He was such a sensitive boy. I don't know where he went. Somewhere between Haley's ambition and his own silence, he disappeared. I still see flickers of him in Ben, when he gets quiet, when he holds the door open for me, and in Marcus, when he falls asleep in the middle of a story and curls into my side without hesitation. Maybe they still have a chance to become kind, but not in a house where their parents show them cruelty. 30 days. It would go fast or slow, depending on what kind of people they decided to be. But I would wait, and I wouldn't change my mind. I woke up before the sun, like I often do now. Habit, mostly. When you've spent a lifetime rising early to pack lunches, iron shirts, get ahead of the day, it's hard to unlearn it, even when no one needs anything from you anymore. The house was still. I made coffee and didn't bother to keep quiet. There was no one I cared to avoid waking. I took my cup to the dining room and sat at the old oak table, the one Robert and I bought in 1976, back when furniture was made to last longer than promises. The table's finish is worn at the corners, the edges soft from decades of elbows and fingertips. The boys used to draw here. Trevor's initials are still faintly scratched into the underside. I used to scold him for things like that. Now I run my fingers over the marks like they're relics. I opened the drawer in the hutch behind me. It sticks slightly, always has. Inside, papers, neatly stacked folders, envelopes with rubber bands around them, yellowing bills, expired insurance cards. I pulled out a box labeled personal. It's where I keep things no one else ever bothered to ask about. Old postcards from my sister in New Mexico. A Christmas card from Robert's mother, who never quite warmed to me. A hand-drawn picture from Trevor when he was 5. A house with a chimney, and 3 figures holding hands. Me, Mommy, Daddy. I ran my thumb over the crayon lines. He always drew me with a big skirt. Said I looked round and safe. There were letters, too. Real ones, in envelopes, with stamps and penmanship. Robert's writing from the years he worked out of town during the construction boom. Tell Trev I miss our cereal dates. Remind him to brush the back teeth. I hadn't read those in years. I'd been too busy cooking meals for people who rarely said thank you. Too busy tiptoeing around Haley's moods, her criticisms, her endless directives. There was one letter that made me pause longer than the rest, dated just a month after Robert passed. Trevor's handwriting, still a bit messy then, before emails took over everything. Mom, I don't know what we're going to do without Dad. I don't know how to help you. I'm trying to be strong, but I miss him so much. I promise I'll take care of you. Always. Love, Trevor. I folded the letter gently, then unfolded it again. The corners had started to wear. The boy who wrote it had disappeared somewhere along the way, grown into a man who let his wife throw that same promise into the trash with one sentence. You belong in a nursing home. I tucked the letter back into its envelope, back into the box, back into the drawer. I don't cry over things like that anymore. Grief changes shape with time. It gets quieter, not softer, just heavier in different places. The morning went on. I made oatmeal, read the paper, watered the plants. Haley didn't come down until almost 10. No makeup, hair tied up like a child. She didn't speak, just poured her coffee and left the kitchen like I wasn't there. That suited me fine. Trevor avoided me too. I heard him moving around upstairs, the occasional shuffle of drawers. Maybe they'd finally started packing, or maybe they were still hoping I'd change my mind. I won't. I spent part of the afternoon in the guest room. Well, it used to be the guest room. Then it became Ben's room, then Marcus's, then a playroom. I never complained when they took it over. I just moved the spare sheets into the hall closet and stopped offering it to visiting friends. Now the room was cluttered with boxes of toys, dusty books, a broken lamp no one had fixed. I sat on the bed, my old daybed from college, now draped in Spider-Man sheets, and looked around at what was left behind. They had made themselves comfortable, but not responsible. No rent, no chores, no thanks. Just assumptions. I found an envelope tucked under the mattress. More of Haley's printouts, articles about senior care homes, comparison charts, a pamphlet with a smiling nurse on the front. Transitioning with dignity. I almost laughed. Almost. So they'd planned it, or at least discussed it. Maybe that's what hurt the most. Not the words themselves, but the quiet calculations behind them. The timing, the confidence that I'd just go along with it, as if I didn't know the value of this house, as if I couldn't remember my own name. I left the pamphlet on the nightstand. Let them see I found it. That night, I didn't cook dinner. I made myself toast and tomato slices. Ate at the table with the windows open, letting the breeze in. The lavender bush had started to bloom again. Even after neglect, it still pushed through. The boys came into the kitchen at one point. Ben asked, "Grandma, is it true we have to move?" I looked at him carefully. He was old enough to know the truth. Old enough to have noticed the tension in the walls. "Yes," I said. "You'll be moving soon." "Did we do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart. This isn't about you." "Is it about Mom and Dad?" I hesitated. Then, "It's about respect. Some people in this house forgot what it means." He nodded slowly. "I don't want to go." I reached across the table and touched his hand. Sometimes we have to leave places before we forget how they once felt. He didn't understand that now, but one day he might. After they went upstairs, I sat alone again. The quiet felt different now. Not empty, just honest. There's nothing lonelier than being invisible in your own home, but nothing more powerful than choosing to be seen again. It was Saturday morning when Trevor finally came to me, not with anger this time, but something more calculated. I could tell by the sound of his footsteps. Slower, controlled, like he was rehearsing the words with every step from the hallway. I was sitting on the porch, knitting. Something simple, just rows of gray yarn I hadn't touched in years. The porch creaked as he stepped outside. I didn't look up. "Mom," he began, voice softer than usual. "Can we talk?" I nodded, but kept my hands moving. He sat on the bench across from me. For a while, he said nothing. Then, this house. It has so many memories. Still knitting. I remember when you used to sit right there with your tea after Dad passed. You'd watch the road for hours. I still do. He nodded, like he expected that. It's just, I want to understand. Why now? Why like this? I paused and looked at him. Why not 2 years ago? When you first moved in and said it would only be temporary? Or when Haley stopped calling me Joe and started saying she, even when I was in the room? Or maybe when you stopped saying goodnight altogether? He looked away. "I didn't want to make things worse," he said. "You made them silent." "And silence is worse." He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "We're your family." "Then act like it." He winced. "I've made mistakes. I see that. But Haley's trying too. And the boys, Ben and Marcus, they love it here. They love you." "I know." He took a breath. "Look, I've been talking to some people. Maybe we can figure something out. Get you more space. Privacy. A routine that works better." "A routine?" "Yeah, like maybe we all agree on boundaries, or Haley and I take over more responsibilities. You shouldn't feel like you have to do everything." I stared at him. "I'm not looking for a compromise, Trevor." His mouth tightened. "This isn't about routines. This is about respect. And the absence of it." He didn't respond. You let your wife speak to me like I'm in the way, like I'm an old box she can't wait to move out of the hallway. You didn't defend me, not once. You just looked the other way. That's not forgetfulness, Trevor. That's choice. I didn't know it felt that bad. You didn't want to know. He sat back again, running a hand down his face. So, what now? You're really going through with this? Yes. Even if it splits the family? The family split a long time ago. I'm just drawing the line where it's already broken. A long silence settled between us. Wind stirred the leaves of the oak tree Robert planted. I felt the weight of its shadow across the porch. Trevor stood up. I guess I'll start looking for places. I nodded once. He hesitated before stepping back inside. Mom, he said quietly, do you still love me? I looked at him for a long moment. I never stopped, I said. But love isn't the same thing as tolerance, and I won't confuse the two anymore. The door closed behind him. I kept knitting. The house had grown quieter since the letter arrived, but it wasn't a peaceful kind of quiet. It was the silence of a room holding its breath. No raised voices, no slamming drawers, but every glance, every footstep carried something unsaid. Heavy, sharp. Haley no longer spoke to me unless she absolutely had to. Even then, her words came clipped and cold, like she was rationing politeness by the ounce. She avoided eye contact. If we passed each other in the hallway, she'd press her body slightly to the wall, as if my presence carried some contaminant. I didn't mind the silence. Not really. I'd lived with noise long enough. TVs left on all day, shoes tossed across floors, phones ringing in the middle of dinner. No. What got to me wasn't the quiet. It was the performative civility. The way she'd smile at the boys in front of me just a little too sweetly, as if to prove she was the mother of the year. Or how she'd slam the dishwasher a bit harder when I left a cup in the sink. It was the kind of hostility that could never be quoted back. Passive, deniable, but constant. I saw it in the way she rearranged things. Subtle invasions. A new mirror in the hallway, where my late husband's photo had always hung. Labels on pantry shelves, as if I'd forgotten where I kept the flour. Decorative pillows with ugly prints tossed onto my reading chair. Little things, but purposeful. Like she was trying to overwrite me, 1 square foot at a time. One afternoon, I walked into the kitchen to find her wiping down the counters, furiously. She didn't look up. You missed your doctor's appointment last week, she said flatly. I canceled it. You should have told me. I would have rearranged the school pickup. I didn't ask you to. She paused for just a second, then went back to scrubbing. You're still part of this household, whether you're acting like it or not. I took a slow breath. Not for much longer. She froze, then smiled, sharp and gleaming. Right. 30 days. How could I forget? She rinsed the sponge and wrung it out until her knuckles whitened. You know, Trevor's been under a lot of stress lately. This hasn't exactly been easy for him. I nodded. I'm sure. She set the sponge down. He lost his father early, Joe. Maybe you forgot that. I haven't forgotten anything. Then maybe you could try being a mother for 5 minutes. I met her eyes. Calm, steady. I was a mother every minute for 38 years. What I stopped being was your doormat. Her expression flickered, just for a second, but she recovered quickly. Well, you'll get your empty house soon enough, she muttered, grabbing her keys from the counter. Let's see how much you enjoy all that space and silence. She left without saying goodbye. The screen door slammed behind her. I stood alone in the kitchen, the scent of bleach lingering in the air. I poured myself a glass of water and leaned on the counter. My hands weren't shaking. I didn't feel angry, just tired. Tired of being tested. Tired of justifying myself in my own home. Later that evening, I went to the garage. The boxes of my things, my old quilts, family albums, the Christmas decorations we used to pull out together, had been pushed to one side to make room for Haley's fitness equipment. An unused elliptical, a stack of dumbbells, a bin of yoga mats she hadn't touched in months. I pulled my boxes forward again, stacked them neatly, claimed my space, even in that cold, dim room. That night, the boys asked if I'd watch a movie with them. Haley didn't object, but she lingered in the doorway with her arms crossed, watching me like I was a guest who had overstayed her welcome. I sat between Ben and Marcus on the couch, their warm little shoulders pressing into mine. The movie was loud and silly, something about dragons. I barely followed the plot. But when Marcus leaned his head against my arm and fell asleep, I looked down at his soft lashes, his quiet trust, and felt that old ache again. The ache of holding something precious that the world wants you to let go of. After they went to bed, I stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing my tea mug. Haley's voice floated in from the living room, low, angry, fast. Trevor responding in half whispers. I didn't listen closely. I didn't need to. The decision had already been made. The storm was coming. I could feel it in the walls, in the floorboards, in the air itself. But I wouldn't flinch. Not this time. It had been 10 days since the letter went out. 10 days since Trevor stopped making eye contact. Since Haley stopped pretending. Since the air in my home turned into something I had to push through just to reach the next room. I woke up that morning with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. It was a quiet sort of knowing, like a ripple across still water. I dressed carefully, chose a blouse Robert used to say made me look like I meant business, and took the old folder from the drawer beside my bed, the one labeled Estate. The law office hadn't changed. Same parking lot. Same dusty blinds. Same water cooler in the hallway that hummed just a bit too loudly. I hadn't seen Mr. Rollins since Robert's estate was settled. He looked older now, like most of us, but his handshake was still steady. "Joan," he said warmly, motioning to the chair across from his desk. "It's been a while. What can I do for you?" "I need to update my will," I said. He raised his brows slightly. "Of course. I'll pull up the old copy." As he clicked through his computer, I placed the manila folder on his desk. Inside were the documents I'd reviewed that morning. Old copies, annotated margins, a list I'd written out longhand. "I want to change everything," I said. "The house, the savings, the accounts, all of it." He looked up. "Would you like to talk me through it?" I took a breath. My son, Trevor, and his wife, Haley, have lived with me for the past 2 years, rent-free. I let them in because they were struggling. I believed they'd get back on their feet. But instead, I stopped. Not because I didn't know how to finish, but because the silence was heavier than the words. They've forgotten what kindness looks like. Or they've chosen to. Either way, they don't see me anymore. Not as a person. Not as family. And they certainly don't treat me like someone whose legacy they should inherit. Mr. Rollins nodded slowly. "I see. I want everything redirected to my granddaughter, Emily." He paused, pen hovering. "Trevor's daughter?" "From his first marriage. She's 17. She visits me. She talks to me like I matter. She asks about Robert, about how I met him, about the house. She listens. I remember her. Bright girl. I nodded. I want to set up a trust in her name. Nothing extravagant. Just something that'll help her. College, a car, a place to live if she needs it. I don't want her depending on the people who turned their backs on me. Mr. Rollins didn't question it. He just nodded and got to work. While he typed, I stared out the window behind his desk. A maple tree was shedding early leaves, one of those years where summer refused to go quietly. Robert would have approved, I think. He always said a man shows his character when he has power, and so does a family. He'd been gone 17 years, and yet his voice came to me clear as a bell sometimes, especially when I needed it most. "Don't give away what people haven't earned, Joe," he once told me. "Especially not your peace." We went over the documents twice. I signed every page with calm hands, not shaking, not bitter, just done. As I stood to leave, Mr. Rollins said, "Do you want them to be notified?" "No." "Let them find out the way I found out who they really are, without warning." He didn't argue. I stepped out into the autumn air, the wind tugging gently at my coat. The sun was soft, the kind of light that casts long shadows without making you squint. Back in the car, I didn't turn on the radio. I just drove. The road home felt different. Not lighter, exactly, but straighter. Like it had finally decided where it was going. When I reached the house, Haley's car was gone. Trevor's, too. The boys must have been at school. The silence inside greeted me like an old friend. I went to the living room, sat in Robert's old armchair, and looked around. Everything they'd wanted, this house, my savings, my support, they'd treated like a given, as if it had no cost, as if I came with no history. But not anymore. They will not inherit what they never valued. It was Emily who knocked. Not the postman, not a delivery, not Trevor with another strained monologue, or Haley with a new reason to be offended. Just a light, familiar knock. 2 short taps and one soft afterthought, like she wasn't sure if she should be here at all. I opened the door, and there she was. 17, nearly grown now. Dark hair pulled into a low braid, hoodie sleeves too long for her arms, chipped nail polish. But her eyes were the same. Those steady, thoughtful eyes that skipped small talk and looked straight into people. "Hi, Grandma," she said, a little breathless. "Come in, sweetheart." She stepped inside and set her bag down carefully, like she remembered this was a house where things mattered. "I hope it's okay I stopped by," she said. I tried calling, but it just rang." "I've been keeping the phone off," I said. "Helps with the quiet." She nodded, as if that made perfect sense. We sat in the kitchen, and I made tea the old way. Leaves steeped, not bagged. She liked it that way. I'd taught her that when she was 12, one of those Saturdays she used to spend with me before her mother moved out of state. "I heard about everything," she said gently after a sip. Of course she had. The family grapevine never rested, especially when scandal was involved. "Did he tell you?" I asked. "Not exactly," she said. "I overheard him talking to Haley. She was yelling about the lawyer, something about you turning on them." I raised an eyebrow. "And what do you think I did?" Emily looked down at her cup, then back at me. "I think," she said, "you finally did something for yourself. And I'm glad." The words hit something in me I hadn't realized was still raw. Not because they were dramatic or poetic, but because they were true. Simple and true. "I've missed you," I said. "I've missed you too." We sat in silence for a while, the good kind. I watched her trace a finger around the rim of her cup, a habit she'd had since childhood. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and warm ceramic. It felt right. "How's school?" I asked. "Better. I dropped chemistry." I smiled. "You always hated chemistry." "Still do." She grinned. And for a moment, I saw the little girl who used to line up her stuffed animals on this very table and make me grade them like they were in school. "I wanted to ask you something," she said after a moment. "Go ahead." "Is it true you changed your will?" I didn't flinch. "Yes." Her face went still. "They're going to be furious." "I imagine so." She stared at her hands. "You didn't have to do that for me." "I didn't do it for you," I said softly. "I did it because I needed to put things where they belonged." She was quiet again. "Emily," I said, "when you visit, you listen. When you leave, you call. You ask how I am. You remember my birthday. You never made me feel like a burden. That matters." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She just reached across the table and took my hand. "I don't want anything from you, Grandma. I just want you to know I love you." "I know. That's why you're the one I trust." She nodded, swallowing hard. "You know," I added, "this house will be yours one day." Her eyes widened. "Grandma, not because I expect you to live here or keep it exactly as it is, but because I want it to go to someone who remembers where it came from." She squeezed my hand tighter. I didn't need more words. That moment was enough. We didn't talk about Haley or Trevor or the 30-day clock slowly ticking in the background. We just finished our tea, sitting in the afternoon light that filtered through the kitchen curtains, the same ones Robert and I had picked out at a hardware store 25 years ago. When Emily left, she hugged me tightly, like she didn't want to let go. I held her just as long. After the door closed, I stood there for a moment, hand still on the knob. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel surrounded by strangers. I felt seen, and that was worth more than all the peace I'd given away. The envelope was waiting on the console table when I came in from the garden. I hadn't seen who delivered it. Probably the same courier Edward always used. Punctual, discreet. The paper was thick, legal grade, the kind people don't mistake for junk mail. Her name was typed clean across the front. Haley Marie Dawson Miller. I didn't touch it. Just left it where it was. The house was too quiet for a Tuesday afternoon. I could hear the clock ticking in the living room. It wasn't long before I heard the front door open. Keys jingling, the clatter of heels, then a pause. A rustle. A silence sharp enough to prick skin. "Joan?" she called, voice flat. I stepped into the hallway. She was holding the envelope already torn open, the letter inside half folded in her hand. Her face was a strange mask, half smile, half snarl, eyes like glass. "You really sent this?" "I did." "You had it hand-delivered?" "Yes." She let out a low laugh, not amused, unhinged. "A final notice? You've escalated to a final notice now?" My God. The 30 days are half gone. She shook her head slowly, the kind of shake people do when they're trying to keep themselves from screaming. "You think this is going to scare me?" "No," I said calmly. "I think it's going to force you to act like an adult." She stepped closer. "You're going to put your own grandchildren out on the street. Do you understand that? Ben is 10. Marcus is 4. You're going to uproot their entire lives because you're bitter?" "I'm not putting them anywhere," I said. "You are. They're your responsibility." Her mouth opened, then closed again. She was searching for the next angle, the next performance. I'm their mother. And yet you've spent 2 years treating their grandmother like staff. She threw the letter onto the floor like it burned her. Unbelievable. What's unbelievable, I said, is how long it took me to say no. She crossed her arms. We'll fight this. You're welcome to try. I'll tell everyone, the neighbors, your church group, your friends. You think they won't judge you for kicking your family out? I think they'll wonder why I didn't do it sooner. The words landed. She flinched. Just slightly, but enough. Trevor won't stand for this. He already has. He just hasn't told you. She turned away, pacing now. Her fingers fluttered, grabbing at the air like she could hold the house in place by will alone. You're ruining everything, she hissed. You're going to die alone in this place. You know that, right? I let the words settle. Let them echo the way she wanted them to. Then, quietly, I'd rather die alone than live with people who make me invisible. She stared at me, breathless. Then, without another word, she stormed up the stairs, her steps pounding like a child's tantrum. The letter lay on the floor where she'd dropped it. I didn't pick it up, just stepped around it and went back to the kitchen. There was stew on the stove, leftovers from last night. I stirred it, watching the broth bubble slowly, evenly. The spoon moved in circles, the same way my life had been moving for years. But now, something had broken through the pattern. The final notice was sent. The countdown had begun. In 20 days, this house would belong to silence again. And to me. Trevor came to me late. The house was quiet. Too late for television. Too early for sleep. I'd just finished washing my teacup, letting the warm water run longer than necessary. The moonlight stretched across the kitchen floor in slanted lines, and the only sound was the soft tick of the wall clock. He stood in the doorway like a boy again, like he had something to confess but wasn't sure if it was worth the punishment. "Can we talk?" he asked. I nodded once and dried my hands on the old dish towel. We sat at the table without tea, without anything between us. Just the hush of a house neither of us had truly shared in years. He looked older in that light. Not tired the way he always claimed to be, but smaller somehow. Worn down in places he couldn't patch. I didn't think it would come to this, he said quietly. It did. He looked at me for a long time, searching for softness. She's not perfect, Mom. I never asked for perfect. She's under a lot of pressure. Work's been rough. The boys, this isn't about pressure, I said. It's about how you treat people when no one's watching. It's about what you allow to grow in your home. He exhaled hard. You make it sound so simple. It is simple, I said. Not easy, but simple. He rubbed his hands together, then rested them flat on the table. You're really not going to change your mind? No. He looked down. I keep thinking about Dad, he said. How he used to sit at this table and talk us through everything. He'd probably tell you to forgive us. No, I said gently. Your father would have told you to come home when you were still worth welcoming. That landed. His eyes tightened, not with anger, but with something deeper. Loss, maybe. Recognition. You said once you wanted to die here, he said. In this house, in peace. I still do. Well, you're going to get your wish. Alone. The words weren't cruel, just honest. Desperate. I'm already alone, I said. You've been here for 2 years, Trevor, and I've never felt lonelier. He swallowed hard. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did. He sat back in his chair. What do you want me to say? Nothing. I didn't ask you here. I don't want to hate you. Then don't. Silence. Then finally, Ben asked today if you still loved him. I closed my eyes briefly. Tell him yes, I said. Tell him I love him deeply. But tell him love doesn't mean letting people treat you badly, not even family. Trevor nodded, slowly, like it was the first time he understood that kind of love. The hard kind. The kind that draws lines, not just open arms. Will you come visit? He asked. When we're settled? I don't know, I said. He stood then, hesitated, reached out like he might touch my shoulder, then dropped his hand. I'm sorry, Mom. I know. He left the kitchen quietly. I sat a while longer, listening to the night settle into the walls. There was guilt in me, somewhere. But it wasn't strong. It wasn't convincing. What I felt more than anything was the return of my name, my place, my breath in this house. And I wouldn't give it up again. The packing began without announcement. One morning, I heard the scrape of cardboard against the hallway floor. Then the low thud of closet doors opening, hangers clinking, drawers sliding open and closed. No yelling, no discussion, just the sound of things being undone. I didn't ask questions. I didn't offer help. I just kept moving through my day. By the time I walked into the kitchen, 2 of the dining room chairs had been pulled into the hallway, balancing boxes stacked too high for safety. Someone had knocked a picture frame sideways on the wall. No one fixed it. Haley passed me once on the stairs, a laundry basket full of shoes in her arms. She didn't look at me, just kept moving, her jaw tight, footsteps clipped. She hadn't worn makeup in days. She looked younger, meaner. Trevor, on the other hand, had that pale, frayed look of someone running from a fire he started. He avoided my eyes, stayed busy with tape and lists and receipts he couldn't quite organize. They didn't ask where they'd go. They didn't tell me either. Maybe they hadn't figured it out. Maybe they didn't think I'd care. The boys were confused, of course. Ben asked if they were going on a trip. Marcus wanted to know if he could take the big bear in his room with them. Everything's fine, I heard Haley mutter at one point. We're just making space. I didn't correct her. Let her explain it however she needed. That afternoon, I made soup. Simple vegetable, the kind I could stretch over 3 days if needed. I cleaned the stovetop while it simmered, wiped the fridge handle, shook the dust off the floor mats. Things I'd always done. But now they felt different. Not like maintenance. More like claiming something back. The house had always been mine. But now it was beginning to feel like it again. In the living room, a few of my books had been pulled from the shelf and set on the coffee table, as if they'd been in the way. A family photo, the one with all of us at the beach 10 summers ago, had been turned face down. I righted it, not out of sentiment, but because it was still part of my story. Even the parts I wouldn't relive. In the evenings, the boys sat quieter than usual. Ben read on the couch. Marcus clung to Haley, but she was too preoccupied, always halfway through a box, or snapping at Trevor about packing tape. I didn't insert myself. But when Marcus wandered into the kitchen one night, holding a sock in one hand and a toy dinosaur in the other, I crouched down. Do you know where we're going? He asked softly. No, sweetheart, I said. But your mom and dad are figuring that out. Will I have my bed there? I think so. He thought about that. Will you come too? No, I'll stay here. Alone? Yes. He looked down at his feet. But who will make the soup? I smiled. I'll still make it. Just for me. He reached out and touched my arm with the toy dinosaur, like a blessing. then turned and padded back down the hallway. That night, I sat on the porch while the house hummed with movement behind me. The cicadas had started early this year. Their song rose and fell like a distant siren, endless and slow. Robert used to say the porch was the best place to think. "It's the edge of the world," he'd joke. "You can look in, or you can look out." That night, I looked out. Haley slammed a door upstairs. Trevor called out something muffled. The boys giggled, then quieted. I let it all pass through me like wind through a screen. I wasn't angry anymore, not even sad. It was like watching the tide go out. I had stood in it for so long, letting it pull at my ankles, wondering if I'd be dragged under. But now the water was retreating, and I was still standing, still home. They were leaving in the morning. No one said it out loud, but the house knew. It was in the way the walls held their breath, in the echo of every footstep. Even the floorboards sounded different, less forgiving, like they were tired of carrying the weight of things unsaid. That afternoon, I cooked. Not because I wanted to mark the occasion, not because they deserved anything ceremonial. I cooked because it steadied me. Because the kitchen was mine again. Because I could. I made roast chicken, slow and golden with potatoes and carrots, just the way Robert liked it. The boys always ate it without fuss, and Trevor used to ask for second helpings before Haley started counting calories for him. I set the table for 5. No one asked why. No one questioned the plates. They just came, one by one, when the smell reached the hallway. Haley sat across from me, arms folded tightly over her chest, as if warmth itself were something I might use against her. Trevor took the chair to my right. He didn't speak, didn't meet my eyes. Ben helped Marcus into his seat, then glanced around nervously, like he was waiting for permission to act normal. No one prayed. No one said thank you. We just ate. The clink of forks against ceramic was the only sound. Haley barely touched her food. Trevor ate like it was a chore. The boys picked at their plates, confused by the quiet. I kept my pace slow, methodical. Each bite was mine, not for them, not for the past, just for me. About halfway through the meal, Marcus whispered something to Ben, who shook his head. Then Marcus turned to me. "Grandma, do you want to come with us tomorrow?" I looked up, gently. "No, sweetheart. I'll be staying here." He blinked. "Forever." "Yes." He didn't understand what forever meant. Not really, but he sensed it was serious. He leaned closer into his brother, who put an arm around him. Trevor cleared his throat. "You know, we could have figured out something different. All of this. It didn't have to go this way." "No, Trevor," I said softly. "It always had to go this way. We just refused to see it." Haley pushed her chair back with a sharp screech. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. "Eating like we're still a family." I looked at her, steady. "We were never not a family, Haley. We just stopped acting like one." She stood up, took her plate, and dumped the untouched food into the trash. The clang of it echoed down the hallway. She disappeared without another word. Trevor stayed seated. He didn't eat another bite. He just sat there, staring at the half-empty plate like it held some kind of answer. Ben finished his potatoes and whispered, "Can we have dessert?" "In the fridge," I said. "I made pudding." He smiled, just barely, and ran to get it. Marcus followed. The boys ate in the living room, cross-legged on the rug, whispering to each other in that secret language siblings share. I stood in the doorway for a moment and watched them. 2 little lives, caught in the tug of decisions they didn't make. Later, after the dishes were washed and the kitchen reset, I found Trevor standing in the hallway, one hand on the staircase railing. "Thanks," he said. Just that. Quiet. Almost real. I nodded. He hesitated. "You'll be okay?" "I already am." He nodded once, like he didn't quite believe it. Then he climbed the stairs. The house fell silent again. I walked through it slowly, turning off the lights. Living room, hallway, kitchen. One by one, each room returned to darkness, not from sadness, but from rest. In the foyer, the last few boxes were stacked neatly, labeled, taped, ready. They were going, and I would remain. Not the same version of myself who once waited by windows, who counted her worth in usefulness and silence. No. This house would no longer carry their noise, no longer soften their carelessness. Tonight, for the first time in years, it felt like home. They left just after 9. I was already awake when the first box went into the car. The front door opened with a groan I knew too well, one I used to hear when Trevor came home late from high school parties, trying not to wake us. This time, no one cared who heard. I stayed in the kitchen, sipping my tea. The mug was warm against my palms, steady. Through the window, I saw Trevor bending to lift a suitcase into the trunk. Haley stood nearby, arms crossed, directing things with short gestures. No words I could hear, just the rhythm of departure. The boys came downstairs last. Ben wore his backpack like it was the first day of school. Marcus held his toy dinosaur by the neck, the tail dragging against the steps. Their smallness hit me like a quiet wave, 2 little bodies moving through a house that no longer made space for them. I met them at the front door, not because I wanted to watch them go, but because I owed them clarity, a face, a goodbye with weight. Ben looked up at me, eyes too old for his age. "Is this goodbye forever?" "No," I said gently. "It's just goodbye for now." He nodded, chewing the inside of his cheek. Marcus held up the dinosaur. "He says thank you for the soup." I smiled. "Tell him he's welcome." Trevor came up behind them, keys in hand. He didn't look tired anymore, just resigned. "Boys, go wait in the car," he said. They obeyed without question. When the door closed behind them, it was just the 2 of us on the porch. Trevor shifted on his feet. "You really meant it," he said quietly. "I did." He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry for everything." "I know." "Will you—" He stopped, started again. "If we call, will you pick up?" "If the call is kind." He took that in. Didn't argue. Haley didn't say goodbye. She didn't come to the porch. She didn't offer one last look, not even for appearance. She climbed into the passenger seat, pulled the door shut, and stared straight ahead. Trevor turned to go, then hesitated. "I used to think you were unshakable," he said. "Like nothing could touch you." "I used to think that too," I said. He looked down at his hands, like they were empty of everything useful. Then he nodded once and walked away. I watched them drive off, not from the window, not hiding behind curtains. I stood at the porch rail, both hands steady, the morning sun warming the paint. The car turned the corner and disappeared. I didn't cry. Not out of pride, just peace. The silence that followed wasn't hollow. It was whole. Inside, the house felt different already. The hallway echoed again, the way it used to. The air moved like it belonged to me. I walked through the rooms, one by one. The upstairs was cleaner than I expected. The beds were made. The drawers emptied. Only a single sock lay in the corner of Marcus's room, forgotten. I picked it up and folded it neatly before tossing it in the laundry. Back downstairs, I opened the windows, let in the air, let it carry out what was left of them. I didn't open the mail. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't check the clock. I just sat in my chair, the one by the window, the one Robert used to sit in when he read the paper. And for the first time in years, I listened to my house breathe. The day after they left, the house didn't feel empty. It felt open. The silence wasn't sharp anymore. It was soft, like a freshly made bed or the hush of a late afternoon rain. I walked through the rooms without pausing, without tiptoeing. There was no one to avoid, no tension waiting in the corners. I started with the hallway. The scuff marks near the baseboards, Trevor's work boots, Haley's heels, had gathered in layers over the years. I crouched with a damp cloth and wiped them away. It took time. My knees ached, and the cloth grayed quickly. But inch by inch, I revealed the white paint underneath. A color I'd chosen. A wall I'd once painted with Robert, both of us laughing when we spilled the tray down the stairs. In the guest bathroom, I emptied the drawers. Half-used creams, hotel shampoos, a lipstick I didn't recognize. I placed them in a bag, not in anger, just with finality. I wouldn't chase down owners for forgotten things. The guest room, what had become Marcus's playroom, was next. The curtains were too short. Ones Haley had insisted on hanging because they made the room look brighter. I took them down and folded them neatly into a box. Tomorrow, I'd drop them off at the church thrift. Under the bed, I found a broken toy truck, 3 unmatched socks, and a children's book with my handwriting on the inside cover. To Ben, for the days when stories are better than noise. Love, Grandma. I sat on the edge of the bed and turned the pages slowly. The corners were worn, the cover stained with some old spill, but the story was intact. Simple, kind, like most good stories are. I kept that. In the laundry room, I ran a load of towels just to freshen them. The hum of the machine filled the space like an old tune I hadn't heard in years. Familiar, mechanical, comforting. When it was done, I hung them on the line outside instead of using the dryer. The breeze was strong that morning. They danced in it like they were glad to be back in the light. By noon, I'd moved to the living room. The pillows Haley brought, those stiff, geometric things, went into a bag. I brought down the ones Robert and I had picked out from a little shop off Route 9. Soft, floral, slightly faded, but real. I fluffed them and placed them just where they used to sit. In the cabinet beneath the TV, I found a pile of DVDs I didn't recognize. Crime dramas, fitness videos, some unopened. I boxed them up. Behind those, I found our old photo albums. They smelled like paper and dust and years. I carried them to the coffee table and sat cross-legged on the rug, flipping through pages I hadn't seen in decades. There we were, Trevor at 5, standing on Robert's shoes as they danced in the kitchen. My sister and I at the county fair, faces sunburned, arms full of kettle corn. Robert holding our first Christmas tree upright while I scowled at the crooked base. None of the photos included Haley, and that felt honest. I didn't linger long on each page. Just enough to smile, to nod at the past and then close the cover gently. I made a sandwich for lunch, sat at the dining room table and ate slowly. No phone, no background noise. Just the ticking of the clock and the creak of the floor as the house settled around me. After lunch, I opened the windows again. Let the wind pass through, carrying out the weight of years. Dust floated in shafts of sunlight, and I watched it without needing to chase it. Later, I swept the porch, refilled the bird feeder, watered the fern that had wilted by the front door while everyone was too busy arguing to notice. The house smelled like lemon cleaner, like soup, like time. In the evening, I put on one of Robert's old records, Ella Fitzgerald, and let her voice fill the rooms. I didn't dance, just listened, just let myself feel the space I had reclaimed. At sunset, I walked through the house again. Every room held less, but felt like more. There were echoes, yes, but not hollow ones. Echoes of the woman I used to be. Echoes of choice. And peace. I poured myself a glass of water and sat by the front window, the same way I used to, before the house got crowded with other people's noise. I didn't wait for anything. I just watched the sky change color. Everything they left behind had been sorted. Everything I wanted to keep, I had returned to its place. I wasn't starting over. I was continuing, this time, on my own terms. The week passed quietly. There was no rush to fill the space they'd left. No impulse to redecorate, repaint, or reinvent. The house didn't need to become something new. It simply needed to return to itself. And I, too, was learning how to do the same. Mornings came soft. I'd rise before the sun, make coffee in silence, and let the light stretch slowly across the floorboards. The quiet wasn't lonely. It was honest. No footsteps overhead. No drawers slamming. No tension vibrating in the walls. I began to hear the house again, the creak of the stairs, the hum of the refrigerator, the rustle of leaves brushing the windows. It was like living with an old friend who finally spoke back. I read more, cooked less, left the doors open longer. I started walking to the market again, the one just a few blocks away. The woman behind the counter remembered me. "It's been a while," she said. I nodded. It has. One afternoon, Emily came by. She brought fresh muffins and a photo she'd framed herself, me and her, sitting in the garden from a year ago. I hadn't even known the picture was taken. "I thought you should have it," she said. I set it on the shelf near the window. Not for decoration. For memory. We didn't talk much that day. Just sat on the porch and watched the wind comb through the trees. She told me about a paper she was writing for school. I told her the lavender was growing back stronger this year. She smiled at that. "Like you," she said. When she left, I didn't feel the old tug of sadness. I just watched her walk down the path, steady and sure. She waved once. I waved back. That night, I stood at the kitchen sink, lights dimmed, window cracked open to the sound of crickets. I thought about the word alone. For so long, it had felt like a punishment, a sentence, something spoken behind gritted teeth or whispered with pity. Now, it felt like something earned, something clean. I wasn't unloved, I wasn't discarded, I wasn't forgotten. I was alone the way a mountain is alone, the way a sea is alone, not untouched, but unshaken. Later, I pulled out the old quilt from the cedar chest, my mother's. I spread it across my bed, smoothed the corners, let the familiar weight settle over me. Before turning out the light, I walked through the house one last time, just to see it, just to feel it. Living room, kitchen, hallway, my room, all mine. Not because no one else wanted it, because I had chosen it, chosen myself. I sat on the edge of the bed, the room dim and quiet. My hands rested in my lap, and I said it, not aloud, but fully. I forgive myself for staying silent for too long. I forgive them for not seeing me. But I will not go back. If you're reading this and something inside you knows exactly what I mean, knows the ache, the hush, the invisibility, then hear me clearly. You are not too late to come back to yourself. And when you do, let it be without apology. Let it be with both hands open. Let it be with the door closed behind them and the window open in front of you. You're not broken. You're becoming. And that is enough.